In this lecture, we'll look at anthropology, and this particular section will be anthropology through just structure of bone. So anthropology is actually the study of human remains, and it may give information about a specific culture, as well as being able to learn about death. So if, mass grave were found, for example, the bones can be studied to figure out, what was cause of death, what was time of death. They can look at artifacts which surround the bodies, or maybe, remnants of clothing that will help give, some idea about what these people did, or, how they died. We can look at pollen maybe that was in nasal cavities, and that will help also give us, season and some kind of date we can use on the bones as well. So bone cells look like this structure up here, and here's, kind of a character kind of drawing of them. And osteoblasts are bone cells, and osteocytes are osteoblasts that actually become involved in the construction of bone, and osteoclasts are bone cells that are involved in the dissolving of bone. So if we just talk about an osteoblast, we're talking about bone cells. And the osteocytes are actually going to be, the cells that go to the site in order to create bone. And an osteoclast will actually help break down bones. So say there was a break and you want to make sure that the bone can grow so that it, is able to fuse with the other bone. So those osteoclasts will actually go and start breaking down some of those edges of the bone so that new osteocytes can be created there. So if we look at the structure of the osteocyte, you see that we have this center virgin canal, and we'd find, blood vessels and things through there. You have your osteocytes, and it almost ends up, when we have this ossification process, as kind of a web that all the cells get stuck in. So bone itself is a hard tissue that originates from cells that we've already talked about, the osteoblasts, and provides structure and attachment points for muscles. And, when we have those muscles, now we have movement. And the process of ossification actually begins during the first weeks of pregnancy, and osteoblasts will migrate to the centers of cartilage production and deposit minerals such as calcium and phosphate that are going to harden and form bone. So, how many bones do you think humans have? Well, it differs. If we're talking about adults, there's 206 bones, roughly. This is an average. And in babies, there's actually 450. The difference is that babies don't have all their bones fused together, so they're going to have lots of little bones, and eventually you're going to have the process of ossification where the bones are going to fuse, and there'll be fewer bones. It's not that, we're growing bones, it's just that we're taking those little bones and fusing them together. You may also recall that when you're around a baby, their head is very delicate, and we have what's called the soft spot on the skull because the plates in the skull are actually not fused. It's still quite soft so that it allows for growth. So you have to be very careful with that, but there's some more fusion points there as well. So let's take a look at the structure of a long bone. The long bones include the tibia, the femur, and the humerus. And we'll look at the skeleton in a minute. So we have the periosteum, which is actually a coating kind of around the outside of the bone, and that's going to be a little bit for protection. The next part is going to be the spongy bone, and this is called the spongy bone because it's not necessarily soft, but it has some kind of, they look like air pockets. It looks like a sponge in there. And then the marrow, where you're going to have the production of blood cells, and compact bone. We have this other substance called cartilage, which is a material that is going to be found around the ends of bones. So on either end of the bone, you might have some cartilage, and what happens is it acts like a shock absorber or a cushion so that the bones don't scrape against one another, and it, takes some of that pressure off. So let's look at a skeleton and label it. First, we have the cranium. The mandible is the jaw. The clavicle, the collarbone. The sternum is the breastbone. The ribs. The scapula is the shoulder blade, so that actually would be pointing to the back there. The long bone in the arm is the humerus. Then we have the vertebrae, and each of these is individual, and there's cartilage plates in between each one. The radius is actually the bone in the lower arm that's in line with your thumb. So you can remember that's how you see the radius. So you can see that it's in line with the thumb here. The pelvis, okay, this big bone is actually multiple bones, which is made up of the sacrum, which is back here. Then you have the ulna, which is the other bone in the arm. We have carpals, which are the bones in the wrist. And we go back to the coccyx, which is the end of the spinal cord or spinal column. The phalanges are the fingers, and the metacarpals are the small bones in the hand. When we go to the leg, we have the long bone here, which is the femur. The patella is the kneecap. The tibia, your shin bone. The fibula is the bone behind the tibia. Then you have the tarsals in the ankle, the metatarsals in the foot, and the phalanges are the bones in the toes. So how do these bones connect? We have joints, which are where two bones meet. So there's different types of joints. You have the hinge joint in the elbow and the knee. Ball and socket joint would be in your hip or your shoulder. And a pivot joint, actually, that's how your head turns. So at those joints, we have ligaments it's a tissue that's going to connect bone to bone. So if we look at this diagram here, you can see, we have some bones here, and this little tissue in here is a ligament. You might have heard the term ACL. That is a ligament that is torn when you have an accident in sports. Tendons are going to be similar tissues that actually connect the muscle to the bone. So you're going to have, actually this is a tendon here. It's the patellar tendon. And typically you'll find those even if you look at a piece of chicken, if you eat a chicken wing before you cook it. There's that yellowish kind of tissue that hooks the meat onto the bone. That's tendon.